Alright guys, Wes here, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to talk about The Last of Us Part 3, as we just got some pretty big news regarding the future of that game from the series director, Neil Druckman. As you guys know, The Last of Us right now is at an all-time high in popularity, thanks to the insane success of the HBO Max show that just concluded its first season. So the franchise that kicked off back in 2013 has since grown into Sony's most critically acclaimed IP, despite there only being a handful of products within it. The Last of Us Part 2 ended on a pretty definitive note, and given the mixed player reception, fans of the series have been a little cautious as to where the developer Naughty Dog is going to take things next, but we recently got some information that has suggested some details as to where Part 3 is in development, and we have some story details to go over as to where Part 3 is likely going to take us. Now, a little bit earlier this year, a ton of leaks came out about a third Last of Us game that started circulating around the internet, and after a reputable source started talking about how the game had just entered very early production and was possibly even being considered for the PlayStation 6. So according to Naughty Dog's creative head Neil Druckman, they stated a while back that they would only do a third Last of Us game if they came up with a great story that they felt needed to be told, making it pretty clear that they hadn't started on anything just yet. This kind of contradicted what he said previously back in April of 2021 when he confirmed that the plot and a story for Part 3 was finished, but the game wasn't even greenlit yet. So it's possible that Neil Druckman's initial pitch for Part 3 was turned down by the team, or Druckman had a change of heart and he didn't want to tell that story anymore. Naughty Dog has reportedly been hard at work on a number of projects, including a multiplayer-based Last of Us spinoff that's expected to be revealed later this year. However, just days after Neil Druckman said that, the leak started pouring out that Naughty Dog was indeed working on a third Last of Us game and that it was in the early stages of production. These leaks also made it seem like the game was shooting for 2026 or a 2027 release date, or just near the tail end of the PlayStation 5's life cycle, which would follow along nicely with Naughty Dog's history of releasing Last of Us games right at the end of a PlayStation console generation. The PS5 has been out since late 2020, so releasing The Last of Us Part 3 roughly 7 years after its launch would be a solid bookend, while also being a nice way of capping off the hardware before people transition to the next generation of PlayStation. Real quick guys, we're going to take a look at the game Off the Grid. So OTG is a narrative-driven AAA battle royale third-person shooter set in a cyberpunk-inspired world and is currently in development by Gunzilla Games. It's an evolution of both battle royale and shooter genres. OTG allows players to shape the story and gameplay at every turn. Now, what we're about to take a look at is Off the Grid Cinema. It's a series of stories directed by Neil Blomkamp based on the universe of Off the Grid. Okay guys, let's go ahead and take a look at Off the Grid. Here we go. I'm excited. I can't wait to see this. OTG Megacorps Zeros. Okay, so this right here is Teardrop, somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. Definitely got some cybernetic stuff on his head. Patched into the mainframe. Kevin Chandler and Vincent Robert. This guy's a Zero, by the way.
What's up, baby?
Don't talk to me like we're equals, Chandler. Sit down.
Anyways, you call my boss, and he calls me.
Nothing's gone awry, Chandler, but yes, there is something sensitive with which we need your help.
What do you want?
It's disposal.
Disposal.
I am always listening to you, Vincent Roberts, in more ways than you can imagine.
Boom! Oh my gosh! Directed by Neil Blomkamp. Off the Grid Cinema. What you guys just watched was a small snippet of the full episode that can be found in the link in the description. While you're there, subscribe to their channel, and thank you so much to Off the Grid for sponsoring today's video. There's been a ton of rumors floating around saying that the PS6 is already in early development, so I'm guessing Sony wants to launch it by 2028 at the latest, which would give the PS5 a total of 8 years on the market, which sounds about right to me. Just a reminder, the first Last of Us game launched back in 2013, roughly 7 years after the launch of the PS3. The Last of Us launched in 2020, again 7 years after the launch of the PS4. So if we're going off of established patterns, it would be safe to assume that Naughty Dog is shooting for a 2026 or a 2027 release for the third game. Naughty Dog's habit of waiting until the end of a console generation to release their games is mainly due to a desire to make sure that the developers are as comfortable as possible with the hardware so that they can really push it to its limits. Some trusted industry insiders also came out over the last couple of months to say that while they don't know if the game is truly in production, they agree with the development timeframe, as AAA games generally take a long time to make these days, days, and Naughty Dog really likes to use that to their advantage as it is. On the opposite end of that scale, some have suggested that Ellie will regret her decision at the end of part 2 and set out on another revenge journey, this time to finish off you-know-who, obviously I'm not going to tell you guys for spoilers, after sparring in their climactic showdown. With how iconic Ellie is and how popular the HBO show ended up being, I don't think the main cast of characters is going to be abandoned in part 3, and I would be willing to bet money that Ellie will be the main character once again. What Naughty Dog chooses to do with her is still entirely up in the air though. Like I said before, Neil Druckman stated that they would only end up making a third Last of Us game if they had a great story to tell, implying that they didn't have one just yet. And in his defense, the second game didn't exactly leave things in a very easy position to continue. Granted, the first game had arguably the perfect ending, so it's not like it's impossible to keep the story moving on, but it would definitely be tough to carry on from where part 2 left off. But who's to say they're going to be focusing on these characters at all? Some fans have even suggested that part 3 is about a new cast of characters with a story that ties into the main cast, while others have suggested that maybe they're going to be taking a look at existing events from new perspectives. Joel and Ellie will always be the faces of the franchise, but with both of their stories pretty much wrapped up, it would be hard to keep them going with a third game, especially if it's still a few years out. One possible angle that Naughty Dog could take is one of a redemption for Ellie, as she spent the last game running around and committing horrible acts in the name of revenge. A lot of people were upset at Ellie's motivations in part 2, so I think a redemption story would not only be a nice piece of hopeful optimism, especially for a universe like this, but also a way to save the character's ongoing reputation, because as it stands right now, Ellie's story is just kind of depressing and not in a good way. Making part 3 about her redemption would be a great idea, and it would keep us from having to awkwardly get invested into a new set of characters in a third entry in a series, which would be, like I said, a very tall order. In terms of a possible release date for this game, Naughty Dog is known to take their sweet time, as I've said, so I wouldn't hold your breath for a gameplay showcase or anything like that in the near future. I think it's relatively possible that Naughty Dog announces The Last of Us Part 3 at the upcoming Sony conferences before E3, but that doesn't really mean anything in terms of where the game is in development. Now, according to a recent podcast with Kinda Funny Games, Neil Druckman was asked basically what is their next game and have they started on his next project, to which he says, I know that a lot of the fans want The Last of Us Part 3, but all he could say is that they are working on their next project. They've already decided on what the next project is going to be, so whether or not that's a new IP or if that's going to be Last of Us Part 3, we really don't know, but what we do know is that they are currently in production with that next game. So I would say that it's probably another 4 to 5 years out at best, but whenever it comes to an official announcement, I'm not entirely sure that we'll see anything at the upcoming PlayStation showcase before E3, as I think that's going to be a little bit too early for that development. Now, with the multiplayer Last of Us faction spinoff in development, I think it's also unlikely that they're going to take focus away from that upcoming project just to show off a trailer for a game that's not even close to being done. So if you ask me, the earliest we're going to see a trailer or any official announcement for The Last of Us Part 3 is going to be mid or late 2024, certainly not before the release of the upcoming multiplayer spinoff. As for the immediate future of the IP, we've got The Last of Us Part 1 coming to PC, and I think it's also very likely we get some kind of official announcement and confirmation of a second season of the HBO Max show. Obviously, we know it's been confirmed, so right now it's just kind of a waiting game. And then, of course, an official gameplay showcase for the multiplayer sometime in 2023, and possibly even a release date by the end of the year. Like I said, though, as for a third mainline game in the series, I don't think we should expect anything from it until next year at the earliest, and the launch date probably isn't going to be for another 3 years after that. But that is, of course, only if we go by their tradition of releasing games at the tail end of the console generation. So if the rumors are true and they're doing that again for part 3, don't expect to see this game until 2027, maybe 2026 if they're really pushed through the development, but it looks like we're going to have to wait quite a bit. No matter what Naughty Dog comes up with the third Last of Us game, and no matter when it comes out, it's surely going to dominate the sales charts and completely own the gaming community for months on end. Despite the mixed player reception for part 2, the IP is still critically acclaimed and seen by many as one of gaming's best regardless of its rough patches. Plus, with a second season of the HBO show on the way, there's no way that Naughty Dog and Sony passes up on the opportunity to release another mainline game. The Last of Us Part 3 can end up going in any number of directions, but hopefully it corrects the mistakes of the second game and gives us a fantastic trilogy ender that will stand the test of time. But yeah, guys, that is going to wrap it up with this video. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Are you excited about the upcoming multiplayer factions for The Last of Us Part 2? Did the show on HBO Max live up to your expectations? And when do you think we're going to get the third Last of Us game? Drop a like, subscribe to the channel with your notifications turned on. And guys, I'm giving away a PlayStation 5. All you have to do is like the video, subscribe to my channel, comment your Twitter handle, and then tweet me proof that you're subscribed, and that will enter you a chance to win a PS5 as well as a game of your choice. Sorry for sounding a bit under the weather. I'm currently sick right now, but I'm kind of getting through it. Thank you all for watching, guys. This has been Wes, and I'll talk to you in the next video.